will be looking at Surah Al-Hajj, inshallah, chapter number 22 of the Quran, verses 1 to 12. Chapter 22 of the Quran, verses 1 to 12. Have it there, inshallah, maybe halfway through the majlis, or earlier on through the majlis, we will try to look at the verses together, inshallah. Let us begin with a loud salawat in honor of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Second, for Amir al-Mu'mineen, Lady Zahra alayhi salam, and for Imam al-Hasan, salamullahi alayhi ajma'een. Third salawat in honor of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and all the shuhada of Karbala, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Four salawats in honor of our 4th to 11th Imams, salamullahi alayhi ajma'een. And the 5th salawat, our loudest in honor of the Imam of our time, the Master and Lord of our age, the awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala al-Sharif. Let's begin with the Surah Al-Fatiha for all of our marhumeen, especially to marhum Khoja and to all the shuhada that have given their life in and around Sayyidah Zainab, Karbala, Najaf, in order to protect the shrines so that we may be able to visit them, inshallah. Surah Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن الناس من يجادل في الله بغير علم ويتبع كل شيطان مريد كتب عليه أنه من تولاه فأنه يضله ويهديه إلى عذاب السعير آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Why is the Ummah so downtrodden? Why is the Ummah so divided? Why is the Ummah in such a lack of resource and in a state of poverty? Why are there so many wars, both internally between Muslims and externally upon Muslims? Why is the Ummah so downtrodden? And how do we learn from history as to why we have reached this place in time and the lessons that we can acquire from history in order to understand how we must move forward in order to resume the honor of the Ummah of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Our series is entitled Living for Islam Today. And yesterday we began our discussion by asking how do we value and maximize the majlis Baba Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. You recall yesterday we mentioned that we probably attend 100 majalis a year. And if you notice, in every other field, be it of business, be it of education, we have tools to measure our success, to know whether we are moving forward. But when we have 100 majalis a year, how do we know whether we have been successful in the time that we have spent dedicated in that ibadah, in the learning of Islam, the development of ourselves, the progress of our families, our communities, our institutions, our countries, our world? And we stated that in terms of the majlis of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the primary tool of measurement of success is to be in accordance with the utmost goal that Imam alayhi salam himself set out in his movement for Karbala. And he said, I do not rise against Yazid because I am seeking mischief or fame, because I am an oppressor. I do not want fame. My one goal is Islah fi ummati jaddi, to have reformation in the ummah of my grandfather. And therefore, if you and I wish to measure the success of the time in which we spend dedicated to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, that is to see whether we are in accordance with that goal. If the goal is this, that I am here, then there is a great distance between the goal and my progress. Whereas, if I am in accordance and I see reformation in myself, I know that I am truly in keeping with the goals of Baba Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. There is ghiba in me, lies in me, enmity in me, jealousy in me, arrogance in me, whatever the case may be. Reformation is the proof and testimony to the success of the time I spend sitting in the majlis of Imam alayhi salam. And we stated, therefore, the way to ensure that takes place is to move from ilm to amal. Ensure that there is action in what we hope to achieve. If you remember, we sent everybody homework last night. And I'm sure everybody did their homework. Everybody was successful in their homework. And I'm going to grade you with an A. And I'm sure that you all did very well, mashallah. And the homework was what? 2 questions. One, if you were to meet Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and he was to sit with you and say, what will you give me from this majalis? You personally, you and me as individuals, how would you respond to the Imam? And secondly, if you put yourself in the shoes of the Imam alayhi salam, and you were to see 500 million Muslims around the world commemorating your martyrdom across the world, what would you want from that? Is there an institution more powerful in the world than when 500 million Muslims come together in order to mourn Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam? What a power we have in the palms of our hands. Maybe because we have forgotten the goal of that movement, power has been squandered. And therefore, we raise the question tonight, in the second part of our series, why is the Ummah so downtrodden? Think about this question with me as we expand. Look at the amount of wars there are in the Muslim world right now. For example, we said about Iraq, Syria, Palestine, Pakistan being drone striked every day, Yemen, Nigeria, so much across the world taking place. Just war, both internally between Muslims and from external powers upon Muslims. The Muslims have been given such wealth Do we not have the richest resources of oil and gas underneath our feet? Yet, where is there the biggest poverty in the world? Amongst the Muslims. Why is that the case? If you think about it, Muslim community today is so downtrodden in so many different ways. And think about the way in which the Muslims are presenting themselves as well. Just 3 days ago, the king of Bahrain, the king, Islam doesn't recognize kingship. Muslims have accepted kings. The king of Bahrain says that he wants to normalize relations with the illegal and illegitimate state of Israel. Whilst only 2 days ago, the Imam of Jama'ah at the Holy Kaaba, Shaykh Sudais, actually has the audacity to say that President Trump is doing good work for the Middle East. This is a man, President Trump, who has, through his drone strikes, killed thousands, I'm not exaggerating, thousands of civilians in his drone strikes. But the Imam, the one who leads the Salah, the one who is supposed to be Adil, this person says that President Trump is good as a peacemaker for the Middle East. How can the Muslims have fallen so far that one of the leaders of the Muslim Ummah today says that we should normalize relationships with the illegal state of Israel? By the way, they're already in mass trade with them anyway. Whilst the Imam of Jama'ah in Mecca, no less, is praising the one who is drone striking innocent women and children. Just think about this, where we are as a Muslim Ummah today. Could you imagine how the Holy Prophet of Islam must be looking at these people? And what he must be thinking about where the Ummah has fallen to in 2017. I'll tell you a funny element as to how downtrodden the Muslim Ummah is today. In the last few years, as you probably know, Al Saud, they have purchased from Britain $6 billion worth of weapons. And as you know, the vast majority of that has found its way to killing innocent Yemenis, found its way to killing innocent Bahrainis, found its way to killing members of people of Saudi Arabia. God knows where it's reached, probably in the hands of ISIS. Now the way it works with these contracts, think about this for a second. The contracts between the government of the UK and Al Saud, when Al Saud purchase weapons from Britain or the companies that make the weapons, part of that money goes into reinvestment so that more weapons can be developed, both for Britain's own defense and sovereignty, and to go back in later to sell those weapons back to Al Saud. So you invest 1 billion, $500 million pays for the weapons, the other $500 million goes into creating more weapons, which they're going to continue to buy anyway. This is the contract. You know what Britain did last week? Those additional weapons that were created from the money from Al Saud have now been contracted to be sold to the Qataris. Because as you know, the Qataris and the Saudis are in a cold war with each other. So the Muslims are paying the money to Britain in order for Britain to resell those very same arms to more Muslims so that Muslims can kill each other. Can you imagine how we must be laughed at by the world? I would be laughing. I ask a simple question. How has the Muslims become so downtrodden, so divided, so desperate, that it must turn to those people that have enslaved them in the first place in order to kill each other. Now surely we must lead the world in some area. Aerospace, medicines, technological advancements, something we must lead the world, the Muslims. We do. MashaAllah, shall I tell you where we lead the world? In the most fattest people in the world. This is true. Go and check out the obesity, the body mass index, to see which country is the fattest country in the world, and you'll find it's in the Khalij, in the Gulf. MashaAllah, we are leading the world somewhere, but it's in the people with the most diabetes. This cannot be our state. How can we continue to allow this? Where has this come from? How has this begun? And how can we begin to step out of this quagmire that we have ended ourselves into? And this is our discussion tonight, inshallah, to query this particular question. What we will do, inshallah, in the next 40 minutes is to look at the way that the Holy Prophet of Islam predicted these issues, and then we will take 3 case scenarios, and we will try to look firstly at what Ma'mun al-Rashid did to destroy the thinking of the Muslim Ummah. Then we will look at the Enlightenment period in Europe, and how the thinking of the Enlightenment period expanded over the world and the Muslims accepted it. And then we will look at a case study in the United States of America, and to see the effect of extremism upon religious people, and how when there is extremism in a religion, people who accept that religion begin to leave that religion because they don't want to be associated to that religion anymore. And if we begin to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about where we should take our thinking from, we put these points together, you will know where the Muslim Ummah has gone wrong, and where the sources of change may come from in order to re-enliven the Muslim Ummah back to a state of honor, back to a state of leadership, back to a state where we have something to offer the world, rather than being divided and completely annihilated by every single power that exists today. The Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, has a very famous hadith. And we will start with thinking about this particular hadith, inshallah. Now when you hear it, imagine you are a companion of the Holy Prophet of Islam, hearing this hadith for the first time. You have lived through the oppression of Mecca, economic blockades, torture, and now you have migrated to Medina. And now you are the power in Medina and even taken over Mecca, expanding the Muslim Ummah. People are flocking towards the beauty of Islam. And now the Holy Prophet of Islam tells you this hadith. Hadith says, لَتَتْبَعُنَّ سَنَنَ مَنْ قَبْلَكُمْ شِبْرًا بِشِبْرٍ. You, the Muslim Ummah, will face the problem of the previous Ummahs. Whatever happened to the previous Ummah of Musa alayhi salam and of Isa alayhi salam, you Muslims will face the same problem. But you will follow the footsteps of the Christians and the Jews, shibran bi shibrin, step by step. You will copy, you the Muslim Ummah, will copy the Jews and the Christians in their practices, shibran bi shibrin, step by step. The hadith continues, until such that if they were to tell you to jump into the hole of a fox, you would do it. That's how much you will end up copying the Jews and the Christians. You have your own Ummah, you have your own Quran, you have your own Hadith, but you will depart from them to the extent that you will follow the practices of the Jews and the Christians so much that if they were to tell you to jump into the hole of a fox, you would do it. Now just imagine for a minute, you were receiving that Hadith at the time of the might of the Muslim Ummah. What would you have said? How would you have reacted? Surely there would have been this disbelief. In fact, it goes so far that in the minor signs of the end of time, the Holy Prophet of Islam has hadith after hadith after hadith about what the Muslims will become. Interestingly enough, one of them says that you will not care about what you put in your stomachs to the extent that you will become obese. What do we say that the Muslim world leads the world in? Obesity. The Prophet actually predicted this 1400 years ago. He says in one of the hadith, the Muslim will become less honored than the goat that is about to be slaughtered. Look at what's happening in Burma, what's happening in Yemen, what's happening in Nigeria, what's happening in Palestine. The Muslim will become less honored than the goat that is about to become slaughtered. At least the goat is honored by some religions. At least the goat is given water. The Muslim will not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this within the Quran. He says in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. You're going to be tested. Fear, khawf, wal-ju', hunger, وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ, and the reduction of your wealth, and even your own children and your produce. وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. It's going to be a test. Bear patiently. Give glad tidings to those people who bear patiently. Now this was mentioned within the books of Hadith 1400 years ago. And if now you think about why we have reached this point at the very beginning of the time, there are two Hadith that I wish to mention, but I'm not saying it for the purposes of sectarianism, because sectarianism has no place in Islam. We say it for the purpose of truth, so that we can arrive at haqq. The first hadith comes to us from our sixth Imam, Jaffer Ladak, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Imam alayhi salam says, the responsibility of every killing that will befall this ummah falls upon the shoulders of those two people. Which two people? So that there is no ambiguity. The first two caliphs of Islam, Abu Bakr and Umar ibn Khattab. This is the hadith of the Imam alayhi salam. The responsibility of every killing that befalls the Muslim ummah falls upon the shoulders of those two people. Why? Because when they snatched khilafat and leadership and usurped the rights of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, it set upon a course of destruction upon the Muslim ummah. There is no two ways about it. This is not sectarianism. This is haqq. In fact, Her Eminence, Lady Zahra alayhi salam, said this herself in a different way. You'll remember, after the snatching of Fadak from her righteous hands, salamullahi alayha, she is narrated to have taken Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam in one hand, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in the other hand, and knocked on the door of each and every one of the Ansar and the Muhajir, and said to them, why did you break your pledge from the day of Khadir? If you were to only stay on the rights of my husband Ali ibn Abi Talib and my two sons, no Muslim would differ in their aqa'id until the end of time. So, we have to understand the starting point of this separation. as to why we have become so weak and downtrodden. And it is an urgent need for this ummah to be able to call back towards imamat through the methodology of Quran and Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, not through any other format. When we call through da'wah and tabligh of akhlaq and haqq. And this is the way in which we discuss things. Now, what we want to do, inshallah, is look at 3 case studies and understand the challenges that the Muslims have succumbed to, where our thinking has gone as opposed to where our thinking should be. Please open your Qur'ans. I ask you all to have your Qur'ans open or at the place of Surah Al-Hajj, chapter number 22, verses 1 to 12. And we will read some of these verses together and we will try to translate and try to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. Now think about this question for a minute. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have revealed these verses in any chapter, correct? He could have revealed it in Surah Al-Baqarah. He could have revealed it in Surah Al-Hashr. He could have revealed it in Surah Yusuf, but he didn't. He revealed these verses in Surah Hajj. Why in Surah Hajj? Hajj is the pilgrimage where the Muslims come together. You see, we have 2 great pilgrimages in Islam. First one is Hajj, which brings approximately 1 to 3 million people per year, depending on how many visas Al Saud allow and what reconstruction is being done in the Haramain. The other great pilgrimage is where, brothers and sisters? To where? To Karbala, where sometimes 15 million people come on the next great Hajj. But think about these great conferences of the Muslim Ummah and the great conference of the Shia Ummah. What is benefited? When do the leaders get together? When is there a joint statement? When is there discussion? When is there dialogue? When is there learning? When is there an appreciation of the other? Think about these things very carefully. 15 million Shia out of 300 million. What a percentage come together from around the world for 1 day, for 3 days, for 10 days. We can't find means to talk with each other. No wonder the Muslim Ummah is so downtrodden. So in these verses, in Surah Hajj, where the Muslim Ummah comes together, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens with these verses. You know, when it comes to the ayyam, the days of Hajj, we try to open Surah Hajj. Let's see what Allah is saying about Hajj. So we read it. Let us read these verses and think about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was trying to tell us when the Muslim Ummah comes together. In these verses, He talks about the thinking and the sources of thinking and the sources of knowledge for humankind. He lists all the sources, the places in which humankind get their knowledge from. Now in philosophy, this is called epistemology. Epistemology is the science, the study of where your knowledge comes from. How do you validate what is true and what is not true? Let me give you a simple example so we understand what we mean. Is science the ultimate source of knowledge? Are your 5 senses the ultimate sources of knowledge? Is the aql the ultimate source of knowledge? Is revelation the ultimate source of knowledge? Is ahadith the ultimate source of knowledge? Is human experience the ultimate source of knowledge? Or are there times and places where all of these are beneficial to mankind? Now if you're a scientist, you might only take 1 or 2. You often hear the scientist says, I don't believe in God because I do not find scientific evidence for God. Correct? So he has excluded certain types of sources of knowledge. Or you'll find another person that says, only my experience in life tells me what is true. I don't need what these books of the past tell me what is true. This is what is being addressed here in Surah Hajj. Where are you as Muslims getting your knowledge from? Where is mankind getting knowledge from? We'll read these verses very quickly and try to see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and then we will see where Muslims have got their knowledges from. Verse number 1. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O people, guard against the punishment from your Lord. Surely the violence of the hour is a grievous thing. This is talking about the end of time, and then moving into the day of judgment. On the day, at the end of time, where the world begins to shake and the end of time begins, on the day you shall see it. People, women who are suckling their own child, they will be so scared of the end of time, they will put down their child and leave their child alone. This is the first two verses. Verse number 3, very important, this is what we started with. And from amongst mankind, there is he who disputes about Allah without knowledge and follows every rebellious Satan. Verse number 4. And against him it is written down that whoever takes that type of person as a friend, someone who acts without knowledge, and someone who follows someone without knowledge, if you take him as a friend, he shall lead you towards the fire and the burning chastisement of hell. What is being said here? Here are sources of knowledge. Verses 1 and 2, the sources of knowledge are what? Quran, Revelation. Revelation is predicting and saying there will be an end of time, and this is what will happen at the end of time. There will be a zalzala, a giant earthquake. A mother who is suckling her child, she'll be so scared she puts down her child. So the first source of knowledge, Revelation, which predicts the future. Verse number 3. And amongst men is he who has disputes with Allah with no knowledge. So a source of knowledge are people who have no knowledge, but they speak and dispute about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second source of knowledge. Third source of knowledge in the same verse, or the fourth verse, sorry. Against him who takes him as a friend, it is written down that if you take that type of person as a friend, they will lead you towards the hellfire. So you have one source of knowledge, Quran, one source of knowledge, someone who doesn't know anything. A third source of knowledge is if you follow the one who doesn't know anything, and then I follow you. If I follow you, verse 4 says, I end up in burning hellfire. No knowledge, you follow the one with no knowledge, and then I follow you. These are all different sources. Verse number 5. Verse number 5 talks about how the baby is made in the womb. Very famous verse. When you want to show science from the Quran, everybody talks about this verse. It talks about the stages of creation deep within the darkness of the womb. So another source of knowledge is what? Science. Next one, verse number 8 in Surah Al-Hajj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and amongst man there is he who disputes about Allah without knowledge and without guidance from an illuminating book. He disputes, but he doesn't have a proper religious book to go back to. First one said, no knowledge of Allah. Second one said, no knowledge of Allah, but no book, no divine book to return back to. Another source where people take their knowledge from. And then, the last ones, verses 11 and 12. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, another source of knowledge are those people who have no certainty in anything. You tell them to go this way, they'll go this way. Tell them to go that way, they'll go that way. They're just flying in the wind like a paper bag. Look at what the verse says. And amongst man, amongst people, is a type of person who, he serves Allah, but he stands on the verge, a precipice, about to fall off the precipice. So that if good befalls him, he is satisfied with Allah. But when a trial afflicts him, what does he do? He loses all faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has no certainty in anything in this life. Whichever way someone takes him, he just flies in the wind. verse 12, he calls on besides Allah and that thing which can't help him and that thing which can't harm him. Now, think about this carefully. From all of these different sources of knowledge, revelation, a person who has no knowledge, a person has no divine book, science, your own human experience, your own fears, where do you think we should base our thinking on? Answer. Of all of these different sources of knowledge, where should we primarily base our thinking on? Which one? The Quran. Is anyone going to dispute that? We will all say yes, Quran, Quran, Quran. But when you look at the Muslim Ummah today, how attached are we to the Quran? Reading, pondering, studying, let alone it being the constitution for our life. Inshallah, 8th and 9th night, we will specifically talk about how to build a relationship with the Quran. But where the thinking of mankind comes from. This is what the Quran says. Now, look at what Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, says. This book is Al-Kafi, our most honorable book of ahadith, in collection of ahadith. Imam Ali alayhi salam says the following: O people, mischief begins with following certain desires and obeying certain man-made laws that are different from the rules and the laws of the Book of Allah. In such a case, people yield to an authority other than the Quran. If falsehood had been remained clear, if people knew what falsehood was, if falsehood had been clear, it would have remained so that the people of intelligence would have known about it. But what happens? People mix falsehood and truth, and then people take something from falsehood and something from truth and mix it and take one from each part, and then claim that this is their religion. The warning comes from Rasulullah. What will you do? Be careful, you will follow the Jews and the Christians step by step, to the extent that if they were to ask you to go into the hole of a fox, you would do it. Then Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam says, no Muslim would have disputed in their aqaid had they had stayed on the path of wilayah. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says that if you mix anything of truth and falsehood, you will take from other than the reality of the Quran. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, here are the sources of your wisdom, sources of your knowledge. Be careful where you take your sources from. The fifth Imam, Muhammad al-Baqir, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, says, فَلَا تَذْهَبَنَّ بِكَ الْمُذَاهِبُ فِيهِمْ. Do not allow people's opinions to take you away from the right path. Now, very briefly, I want to mention 3 case studies for you and I to understand the types of challenges Muslim Ummah has faced in the past, which remain until today, and think about whether we have these same problems in our thinking. Why we are so downtrodden as a Muslim Ummah today. The first one came at the time of our 8th Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. The then tyrant, Ma'mun al-Rashid, created something in history what is known as Baytul Hikmah. Baytul Hikmah, a house of wisdom. It wasn't really a house of wisdom. The idea was that they would bring in texts from around the world for the purpose of translating them into Arabic so that they could be spread amongst the Muslims
and the Muslims would take from them. Now this is good. We must learn from all different sources. We must know what the world says. We do not believe in banning books and burning books. We are people of intelligence. Now, what happened? When he brought this Bayt al-Hikmah in, the actual purpose of this was to create rival knowledge, to rival the 8th Imam alayhi salam. The one who started this actually was the one who jailed the 7th Imam alayhi salam. The 5th and 6th Imam salamullahi alayhima created such a university within Medina and Kufa. Muslims, non-Muslims flocked to Medina and learned from Islam. When they martyred the 6th Imam alayhi salam, they put the 7th Imam in jail for so long, for half his life. Why? So that he would not be able to pursue the path of teaching, and in place they would put in government stooges. You become the Imam, you become the Imam, everyone becomes the Imam, and that is why we have so many Imams of different sects and faiths, because some of them were placed, you should be the Imam, and we have rival knowledges. By the time it came to Ma'mun al-Rashid, he decided not just to place fake stooges of ulama, he decided to bring in different knowledges from Greece and have them translated for the purpose of the Muslims adopting these ideas. Until today, and even in the Shia world, the Muslims have taken on Aristotelian thinking because of Ma'mun al-Rashid. You know what he did? In particular, according to some thinkers, he took the book of Socrates about a just city and decided to base his way of ruling on Socrates' way of ruling. You know what he did? As he began to invade the lands up to Uzbekistan, he was pushed back by the Turks. But what he did was negotiate, and he took thousands of Turkish warriors and said that you will become an army for the Muslims to protect Banu Abbas from destruction. We will have an army, the first time a state army for Banu Abbas. What did he do? He took these 1,000 warriors from Turkey and he made them give birth in great numbers until there were 70,000. And he never told them who their fathers were and what their ancestry was. Basing his idea on Socrates, he said, you are slaves to the Caliph, and I am like your father, and you must obey the Caliph, and the Caliph is the one who looks after you. You are not allowed any property, and you must have many, many wives so you can continue to produce, and all of these will continue to be slaves. And so Banu Abbas made 70,000 slaves in a slave army. Now, when the Muslims began to expand into other areas, and new Muslims were taken, and they began to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, they began to see this caliph, they began to see this army, they began to see this culture, they began to see these ways. What did they think was the right way of Islam? They thought this was the way of Islam. And so they adopted the way and the thinking of everything that Ma'mun al-Rashid had taken from the rest of the world, and the way in which he was governing, and they bought it for themselves and believed that this was Islam. This happens until today. Whenever something comes, we begin to adopt it for ourselves and think that this is the way in which Muslims are supposed to be. I'll give you an example. The Muslims are supposed to be one ummah, correct or not? Yes or no? We're supposed to be an ummah, correct? The word ummah is mentioned in the Quran. Rasulullah has mentioned the word ummah 100 times in the ahadith. We are supposed to be one body. What does the hadith say? Man asbaha wa lam yahtammu bi umur al-muslimin fahuwa laysa bi muslimin. The one who wakes up in the morning and is not concerned by the affairs, the needs of the Muslim ummah, he should not consider himself a Muslim. What did the Holy Prophet of Islam say? That if one part of the body hurts, the rest of the body feels the pain. When one part of the Ummah is suffering, the rest of the Ummah is supposed to be suffering. The reality is, we have completely left the idea of the Ummah, and we have divided ourselves into countries and nation states. Saudi Arabia is at war with Yemen. Saudi Arabia is at war with Bahrain. Saudi Arabia is at war with Qatar. Syria is at war with Turkey. Afghanistan is at war with these. These are at war with that. We are no longer a Muslim Ummah. We decided to take the external ideas of whom the French and the British, and then we divided ourselves up just like the British did, just like the French did, and then we became nationalistic Muslims. So now, instead of me thinking that the Ummah is in pain, I will say they're Burmese Muslims. Yeah, they suffer, but they're different Muslims. It's okay. Yeah, they're Yemeni Muslims. They're Bahraini Muslims. No, brothers, we are an Ummah. We have accepted external ideology and mixed it with the truth. What did Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam say? When you take part of the truth, part of the falsehood, mix it together, people will claim it to be the truth and say, this is the Quran, but it's nothing to do with the Quran. We took our knowledge from elsewhere. We took our ideals from elsewhere. We became divided and so weak as a Muslim Ummah. Now Muslims are killing each other in every country. And instead of saying Ummah, we wave a flag and we say Yemen, Bahrain, Pakistan, Afghanistan. Baba, where did you get this idea from? Is this from the Quran? Is this from the Prophet? Is this from Imam? Or have you taken the idea of Britain to divide yourselves and then said, this is who we are? Is your identity coming from the British idea, or your identity comes from Rasulullah? If you want to take the identity of the British, then just say so, I don't mind. But just say you're a prophet of a different religion, you're making your own religion, and then at least I know whether it's the religion of Rasul or your religion. But don't claim it to be Islam. Destroy the Muslim Ummah. Make us so downtrodden and weakened, and then claim this is Islam. 1.6 billion Muslims. What do we have to show for it? The most obese people in the world. Oil, gas, revenue, the wars, rape, murder across the Muslim land. You have to ask yourselves why. What went wrong? What happened to us? And the first thing was that we accepted a thinking which was external to the thinking of the Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, where we took our sources of knowledge. Number one. Number two, the second case study takes place in the Enlightenment period. Around, let's call the 17 or the post, let's go 1800s, coming up to the industrial period in the 1900s, 17th, 18th century. In Europe, they decided to have what they think was an Enlightenment period, and the idea was that we want to illuminate our thinking and we want to bring justice and rights to the world. And this is genuinely very important and very good. Where praise is due, praise is due. But what happened? People saw the injustices emanating from deen, from religion, and instead they said, if this is what religion is bringing to us, we need to separate ourselves from religion and become secular and separate ourselves from God and allow us to find human values, because religion is not giving us human values. They created an ideology called secularism, separating church and state. God exists, fine, you want to have your God? Keep him within your church. Keep him within your masjid. Keep him within your Husayniyah. But when you go out onto the streets, when you're in education, when you're in government, don't bring up God. Just keep him here. You want to have a khutbah? Have a khutbah. You want to pray? Pray. But don't let God enter into the public discourse. Separate God and state. Church and state. Or for us, Muslim. Or mosque and state. Now, what happened was, people were looking at religion and they found that everything evil was being justified by religion. And everything that they wanted to bring about in reforming was coming from away from religion. So what happened in Europe? There was slavery. Blacks were slaved, exported to the whole world. People wanted to free the slaves. And where did they find justification for slaves? In the Bible, the Christians were justifying it through the children of Nuh alayhi salam. Said Nuh had one black child, he was doomed to become a slave, and see, God has justified slavery. We should keep blacks as slaves. See, God said we should do it. Rasulullah had slaves, we should have slaves. This is what is mentioned, we should also have slaves. And so people used religion in order to justify an evil. Women wanted to be able to have freedom, to be able to participate in education, to be able to teach, to be able to be doctors, to be able to be in government, to be able to have rights. What was it called? The suffragette movement. You all know about this or heard about this. What happened? People said, no, woman is less than man. Where? In the original sin, in the story of Adam and Eve. See, woman is worse than man. Has no rights. So they justified it through religion. And they said, look, the Muslims were saying, woman is less than man. Woman doesn't have a chance to become anything in society. They justified it through religion. And everything evil was justified through religion. Torture was justified through religion. Killing in the name of God was justified through religion. Slavery was justified through religion. Oppressing women was justified through religion. So where did people go in order to find human rights? They had to leave religion, didn't they? Because the way in which religion was being presented to them, it was so false, people fled the religion because religion wasn't providing anything to them. So what did they do? They created an enlightenment period. They said, we are enlightened period. We are enlightened people. The books of God tell us this, we are better than God. Why do we need God if God is saying do evil whilst we are human beings and we are better than God's people? Can you see the problem? What happens? People fled religion. And until today, people have fled religion. Why? Because they find something better in the way in which religion is being presented to them. What happened? When Muslims adopted these same ideals. Who? In Turkey, Kemal Atatürk, what did he say? Disband the Ottoman Empire. Again, look at the language. Muslims don't believe in an empire, but again, we use these words. Disband it, and now he got rid of the Arabic language, said take off the hijab, stop writing in Arabic, don't have the adhan. Muslims fled. Then we were divided, and we decided instead of having ulama, instead of having righteous leaders, the Holy Prophet of Islam said, Al-ulama warathatul anbiya. The Muslim Ummah decided to take kings and queens, prime ministers and presidents instead. Second reason. And the third reason is a case study for our challenges, very briefly as we conclude, comes from the United States of America. In the 1970s, the extreme right-wing Christians, the conservative Christians, became very dominant, expanded. Today, Christians are leaving Christianity in record numbers. I don't have time to go in detail with you because our time is concluding in 5 minutes, but people are leaving Christianity in record numbers. You know why? They cite the reasons in studies, in academic studies. And if you want these, I can send them to you. Anyone watching online, I can send them to you. Because there is extremism in Christianity, KKK came up and said, we need to have militias, we need to kill, we need to oppress, white is better than black, women have no role in society. This is the belief that comes out from them. Because the extreme Christians came out, Christians said, if this is religion, we don't want anything to do with it, we don't want to be identified. Christians are fleeing religion because of extremism. You know what's happening in Muslim worlds? Because of extremists, the backlash upon Muslims are fleeing religion as well. Every day, every week, there's a bomb that goes off. Someone is claiming it, Allahu Akbar, blows himself up in the name of Allah, na'udhu billah. Muslims are saying, if this is what is meant by a Sharia, if this is what is meant by an Islamic state, if this is what Mahdi is going to bring in Islamic state, I don't want anything to do with it. You know what's happening in the West? Because there is such pressure and so much violence on women, sisters, muhajjabat, our hijabi sisters who are walking down the road being attacked, in record numbers sisters are taking off their hijab because they don't want to be identified as a Muslim, in fear of what will happen to their life. What will happen in the next generation, in 2 generations' time? Extremism, and when in even our community as Shia, when Shias try to become extreme and force an ideology upon another person, Muslims and Shias say, this is what religion is, I don't want anything to do with it. And they flee the religion. Don't believe me? Listen to this hadith of your 6th Imam, Imam Jaffer Ladak, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Listen what he says about the extremist Shia, not extremist Muslim. The extremist Shia who puts other Muslims off their religion. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, إِلَيْنَا يَرْجِعُ الْغَالِي فَلَا نَقْبَلُهُ وَبِنَا يُلْحِقُ الْمُقَصِّرُ فَنَقْبَلَهُ. Allahu Akbar. To us shall the excessive, the extreme, the one who goes beyond the boundaries, to us shall the excessive return. Not to Allah, to us, Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Why? Because we represent them, and so we will be raised with our Imam. Quran says, يَوْمَ نَدْعُو كُلُّ أُمَامٍ بِإِمَامِهِ يَوْمَ نَدْعُو كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِ. On the day when all of you will be raised with your Imam. Your Imam is Imam Abu Hanifa, you will be raised with him. Your Imam is Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, you will be raised with him. إِلَيْنَا يَرْجِعُ الْغَالِي فَلَا نَقْبَلَهُ. To us will be raised the excessive, but we won't accept him. فَلَا نَقْبَلَهُ. But I will not accept the extremist. وَبِنَا يُلْحِقُ الْمُقَصِّرُ. The muqassir. You know what muqassir means? In the Arabic language is qasir and muqassir. Qasir is the one who falls short of his duty, but he's excused by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because he had a genuine reason. He didn't know, he wasn't aware, he wasn't unable to afford the truth, and so he's excused by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Qasir. Muqassir is the one who falls short, but he's not excused. Why? Because he knew the truth. The truth was available to him. Listen to this. To us will return the excessive, the extremist, but I won't accept him. But to us will return the muqassir, the one who falls short, even though he knew what he was supposed to be doing, فَنَقْبَلَهُ. But we will still accept him. Do wrong. I'm not saying do wrong, but if you do wrong, the Imam, inshallah, will still accept you. Be an extremist, and the Imam won't accept you. Do it my way or the highway. You have to do what my marja says. You have to do what my alim says. Otherwise you're all going to hell. Otherwise I'm going to call you this and I'm going to call you that. Brother, taqleed, both in Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and in Ahl Tashayyuh, is freedom. It means that you are honoring the thought of the alim that you think is most correct. Doesn't mean that you get to impose it upon another person. And what happens? When you become extreme, you send people away, you're responsible for that on the Day of Judgment. Those Wahhabi that blow themselves up and the Muslims are affected, are they not accountable on the Day of Judgment? Those Wahhabis that blow themselves up and then Muslims say, I don't want anything to do with this religion, if this is what religion is, are they not accountable on the Day of Judgment? As a Shia, if I push someone away from religion because I am extreme, am I not accountable on the Day of Judgment for that Muslim going away? We have moved away from the fikr, the thinking of Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and this is why we are so downtrodden. The first reason was where we get the sources of our information. If you take from external, you are following the sunnah of Ma'mun al-Rashid. If you want to take from the British and the French ideology of 17th and 18th century, then don't call it Islam. Don't call it secular Islam. Call it whatever you want to call it, but your own religion. Don't call it Islam. And if you want to be an extremist who sends away other people, and this is another reason why Muslims are so downtrodden, because they are fleeing in numbers, scared of what people are saying this is the religion. We are ripped apart by this nationalism, we are ripped apart by external ideas, and we don't have head or tails of who we are, what a Muslim is supposed to be. This, brothers and sisters, is why we are in such a downtrodden state. Homework. Because I know how much all of you love to go home and do homework. It's very simple. I want by tomorrow a 5,000 word essay from each. No. That'll be nice, 3,000. No.
Brother, excuse me, brother. Because to extreme leaders from the Shia community, we are no already extreme Shia leaders. Can you give me any of them?
Inshallah, after our time is up, we will talk inshallah.
There are existing models of that in the Shia community.
We do have existing in the Shia community. We do have much extremism. We have extremism, like we said, in taking from outside Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam and Quran. We have extremism where they're extreme against other Shia, extreme against other Muslims. Where some people are so extreme against brothers from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, brothers from Sufiya, brothers from the Wahhabiyah.
Not the Sunni brothers, because specifically of the Shia.
Yes.
You want to say sorry for Sunni from Iran country and all that?
No, I'm not naming a country. I'm not naming a country, I'm not naming a marja. I'm saying we sometimes have a problem with extremism. If it's a conditional statement, if I am extreme and I push away someone else, I am responsible for that.
Why should be giving the names to me?
No, it's not about individuals. If you think someone is extreme or you think there's an extreme ideology, this is the homework which I'm setting. Think about these three things. The first one was, for yourself, think about these three things. One, where you get your sources of information from. The second thing is, whether we are living as a system which was given to us in the 17th and 18th centuries by the Enlightenment period. Are we living like the French and the British methodology, or are we living like Muslims? And the third one is, are we in any way, shape or form, even by one iota, extreme? Or are we balanced as Muslims, as per the Holy Prophet of Islam was Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is the homework. Just think about it for yourself. And inshallah, tomorrow we will talk about what is known as the maqasid al-sharia, the ultimate goals of the sharia. What does the sharia want us to be? What does it expect us to be able to achieve? And then we know whether we are in line with the sharia or not. Between the 26th and 28th of Dhul Hijjah. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam arrived in an area outside Karbala by about 120 miles. When the Imam leaves Medina for the last time, he says his farewell to his family members, he says farewell to his companions, and on that last night, the narrations tell us that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam spent the night at the grave of two people. The first was his mother Fatima al-Zahra, and the second was the grave of his grandfather Rasulullah. When he goes to the grave of his mother Fatima alayhi salam, he must now bid her farewell, but in the knowledge that really it is not bidding his mother farewell, because from the moment he departs from Medina, the reality is Fatima will be following him step by step, to the extent that when Shimr severs the head of Abu Abdullah, it is Fatima that is standing there and saying, "Oh Shimr, what are you doing to my beloved son Hussein?" He bids farewell to his mother and says, "Oh mother, on the day of judgment I know that you will take my shirt with 300 arrows, with 300 wounds on that shirt, blood drenched of mine, and you will place it before Allah and you will say, 'Oh Allah, judge between me and the ones who did this to my son.'" He bids farewell to his mother, Khuda Hafiz, and then he goes to the grave of his grandfather Rasulullah. The hadith says, he falls upon the grave of his grandfather and says, "Oh grandfather, I am tired of this world. This world has become so treacherous. These people have left your way so much. I long to be taken with you." He falls asleep. The hadith says he sees his grandfather in a dream, and he sees Rasulullah, he sees Amir al-Mu'mineen, he sees his family members. Rasulullah says, "Oh Hussein, get up, leave for Karbala, achieve martyrdom." Imam says, "Oh grandfather, I have had enough of this world. Just take me now with you." Rasulullah responds and says, "Oh Hussein, you must achieve martyrdom. There is a sanctified, special place for you in heaven that awaits, but can only be achieved by your achieving martyrdom." Imam wakes up, he gathers his family, he begins to depart. As he leaves, Muhammad al-Hanafiyyah comes to him and says, "Oh Abu Abdullah, why do you need to leave?" He says, "We must achieve martyrdom. This is what has been told to me by my Prophet." He says to him, "Then, oh Abu Abdullah, if this is the case, then why do you bring your women and children?" He says, "Rasulullah told me Allah wants to see the women and children in captivity. He wants to see what will happen to them, and what will happen when they are taken through the streets of Damascus. They will throw stones at Sayyida Ruqayya. They will throw boiling water upon Sayyida Zainab. They will try to sell Sayyida Kulthum off as a slave to the Christians and Jews. They will leave them paraded. They will take them outside the palace of Yazid and force them to wait for 48 hours whilst Yazid is decorating the palace with court jesters and clowns. Allah wishes to see how they are in this state." As he leaves from Hajj, he reaches his great companion. He reaches his companion Farazdak. He says, "Oh Farazdak, what is the word from the people that you have left behind?" He says, "By Allah, the hearts of the Shia are with you. The hearts of the people are with you, but their swords are against you with Banu Umayyah." He says, "You have spoken the truth." As he arrives on the 26th and 28th of the Hijjah, 120 miles outside Karbala, he reaches to a pond. The hadith says he actually waits. Imam Hussein alayhi salam waits there a few days, and he tells his companions, drink. Fill the mushk that you have with as much water as you can. Drink now, for in a few days you will not be able to. For in a few days they will take the water away from you. In a few days' time, Sakina will run, come to Abbas and say, oh Abbas, al-Hatash, al-Hatash. She will take the mushk, she will put it to her lips, and not a drop will come to her throat. He will come a time when Ali Asghar will have his eyes sunken into his head because of the thirst. He will not have the strength to be able to open his mouth and look towards his mother to ask for milk. Drink now whilst you have the chance. Fill the mushk whilst you have the chance. It is said, as he is waiting on those days, it is those days that come as he waits. It is now the armies of Yazid that he begins to see in the distance. Who comes? 1,000 men led by Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. He comes towards him and he says, oh Hur, take your people, stand by the river, and my companions, my Sahaba will feed your companions water. He comes, every one of them, and the companions of Hussein drink water, give water to the companions, to the army of Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. Can you imagine the humanity? It will only be a few days until the army of Hur is treacherous towards the children of Hussein ibn ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Please raise your hands. Let us join each other in dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. If he were to pass away from this world before his coming, raise us from our graves so that we may partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We ask you, Ya Allah, there are many people around the world going through such desperate times, those people in a state of war, poverty, homelessness, disease and disaster. Grant them all safety, security and victory for the sake of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, help us to be like the companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Help us to improve ourselves and have the goal of Islah in these months, inshaAllah. We ask you, Ya Allah, grant us the ziyarah of Imam Hussein fi dunya wal akhirah. And in the final moments of our life, we die in the love of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the love of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, one loud salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.